25 years ago, a bill passed that changed the way Oregon works with justice-involved individuals. It transferred the responsibility of people on probation, post-prison supervision, and incarceration sentences of 12 months or less from the state to the counties. And in return, the state foots the bill. To understand that change, we can compare community corrections to roller derby, where justice-involved individuals are players, and the officers serving them can be coaches and referees who sometimes wear both hats. The ultimate goal is for team members to play a fair and successful game of life. By statute, community corrections is funded to provide three things: supervision, sanctions, and services or supports. Referees come into the picture for supervision and sanctions. They oversee things like community service crews and local jail time. Referees are there when players break the rules. Coaches offer services and supports. They guide players through things like job training, housing support, and parenting classes. Coaches are there to help with lasting behavioral change by shifting how and what players think and adapt their programs to players' specific needs. They support players every step of the way, before and during the game, and after, to celebrate victories. Modern community corrections uses these approaches, run by referees and coaches, in combination to gradually reintegrate players into the community. But up until about a decade ago, before a new bill tweaked the system, community corrections was driven more by referees, meaning it was more punitive. You break the rules, you get punished. And while refereeing with supervision and sanctions is still an important part of the game, studies tell us that coaching with services and supports is far more effective at lasting change. That said, being a coach takes more time than being a referee. Blowing a whistle doesn't take much time at all, and players won't improve their game by sitting on the bench. So, how much more time, and thus money, does coaching take exactly? Let's first walk through how community corrections gets funded. Funding for community corrections comes from Oregon's general fund and is calculated every 2 years. To get a baseline for the total statewide community corrections budget, you multiply the total forecasted supervised population by what's called a capitation rate, or average daily cost of managing one person. Then each county gets a percent of that total statewide budget based on the number of people they're serving, weighted by workload. And that budget is adjusted annually according to state agency, cost of living, new laws that pass, or funding for special programs that are added. Okay, but let's rewind for a second. We introduced this thing called a capitation rate and said it was an average daily cost of managing one person. But how do we get that number? Well, it all comes down to something called the actual cost study, which essentially counts for all the resources spent on community corrections. The study happens every 6 years and is broken down into two parts: a financial study and a time study. The financial study determines how much money each of Oregon's 36 counties spend on things like employment training programs, counseling services, staff salaries, buildings, cars, and everything else needed to deliver successful community corrections. And then there's the time study. The time study determines the amount of time counties spend managing people at various levels of supervision. The 2017 time study, the most recent one, tracked 5 different categories of randomly selected people over 9 weeks and gathered 50,000 data entries. It showed that people who are higher risk to reoffend typically take 5 times more time to manage than people who are lower risk. So after collecting all this data, time and money, a little basic math gets us to that capitation rate. Here's a cup of coffee, because we're about to crunch some numbers. First, the total county costs are divided by total county hours to get the total cost of delivering 1 hour of supervision. Next, those total county hours are multiplied by the cost to deliver 1 hour of supervision, which equals the total statewide cost. Then, the total statewide cost is divided by the total number of community corrections individuals to get an average cost per head per day. And that's the capitation rate. So what does this all mean? Community corrections spends more time managing or coaching individuals than it did in the past. But evidence shows these time-intensive, customized programs pay off. Today, community corrections is less punitive and has a smaller footprint. It's seen a 48% decrease of local control and sanctions and a 22% decrease in the number of people on probation. In the long run, community corrections that prioritizes supports and services over confinement tend to drive the system towards the most cost-effective way of managing justice-involved individuals. It allows players to be better teammates and neighbors so they can ultimately play the game and win.